So this is a kid that's 25 years old, extremely good man corner, which is a little bit interesting for me because they didn't play too much man, especially knowing that they had drafted Ambry Thomas, who was brought in to be a man corner. Now they're going to bring in Charvarius Ward, and are they going to change things? I'm not sure. But overall, what are your thoughts on the signing of Ward?
Yeah, I mean, initially, because all the rumors before they signed Ward was we're bringing Stephon Gilmore in, right? So I think people had that expectation of Stephon Gilmore, Gilly Lock, and then ended up with Charvarius Ward. So I think just the name recognition and just the excitement that people had that maybe we would get Stephon Gilmore, I think a lot of people kind of were just like, who's this, right? But when you actually do some research into what Charvarius Ward is as a player and what he did last season, I'm extremely excited about this move, Jesse. And I think he fits exactly what the 49ers need in a corner. Right off the bat, he's young, right? 25 years old, going to be 26 when he plays next season. When is the last time the 49ers have actually paid a young cornerback to come onto the team? Like, these guys the 49ers are usually used to paying older guys like Richard Sherman and, Josh Norman, guys like that. So the fact that they went out, spent assets on a 25-year-old corner, I think is a good sign that the 49ers are starting to turn the corner maybe on the corners, no pun intended. The second thing is he is a guy who's elite at tackling at the cornerback position. A PFF rated him. He only missed 5% of his tackles last season. That was like the lowest out of all the corners I think they rated on PFF. And we know for the 49ers, your ability to tackle at that corner position is imperative because the way the defensive set up through that defensive line, quarterbacks are going to get the ball out of their hands very quickly, which means the 49er corners have to be able to tackle so that those receivers don't get off big plays. So the fact that he's a staunch tackler, I think, is really great. Another key thing is he didn't have very many penalties, so he doesn't get a lot of pass interference. And we know that early last season how much those pass interference from the secondary, brutalized the team. And then I just think it does a lot for this cornerback room. Gives them a lot of flexibility. Mosley, somebody who's played the nickel corner early in his career. We have Ambry Thomas out there. So we got three guys that could play the outside that are all young and ascending. Maybe this gives us the opportunity to get Jason Verrett as a luxury type person to bring in, and somebody that we don't have to bank on, but if he is healthy, can obviously add to that rotation. Takes more pressure off of Ambry, Lenore. So I just like everything about this pickup. I think he's going to fit in seamlessly with the 49ers, and it's exciting to see them get another man corner because maybe D'Amico's starting to want to go more man-to-man coverage, which would be fun to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I like about it is that I think there's a real chance that Mosley, who's played very well, is going to price himself out of the 49ers here in the next, year or so whenever he's up again. And so when that happens, you've got Ward, who's a man corner, and you've got Ambry Thomas, who you drafted, who's also a man corner. So I think the future is really probably those two starting if Mosley does price himself out, which I definitely could see, and both of them being press man type corners. I think that's the future of this defense. So that's how I see things playing out. That's why I like the signing. I definitely pissed people off on Twitter with a remark that I made when they signed him, and I stand by it. He has basically, again, goes about it a completely different way. I understand that, but basically the same production as Emmanuel Mosley, but is triple the cost. People got upset at that, tried to throw out all these crazy numbers, which I refuted with numbers that showed that I was right. And my point with that is that you can look at it two ways. You can look at it and say, hey, Emmanuel Mosley is extremely inexpensive. I agree with that. But you can also look at it and say, well, maybe they slightly overpaid for Ward. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a good player. It's not a good signing. Sometimes you're going to overpay for players, especially day one of free agency. But the bottom line is I think they slightly overpaid. I personally would have rather had guys like Reddick. I would have paid 2.5 million annually more for a JC Jackson. But the flip side of that is those guys have to want to come to San Francisco. And I understand those things. So, these are conversations that you can't really have in 180 characters on Twitter. But
Right.
man, people really got upset at that comment. It's like, hey, it is what it is. The production is roughly the same. Are they different players? Do they get there differently? Of course they do. Does Charvarius Ward have some skill sets that Mosley doesn't and vice versa? Absolutely. But stat for stat, they are basically at the same production. Now, the good news is Ward is not there to replace Mosley, at least not this year. Maybe he is down the line, like I just talked about, but for now, he is there to probably start opposite of Mosley, and that's a good thing. If you have two guys at Mosley's level, I'm taking that. That is very, very good. And Ambry Thomas can sit back. He can learn. He can be the first guy off the bench. And I have a lot of confidence in that. I'll take that over Josh Norman for sure. So overall, I am very happy about the signing. But people, come on, don't get so upset. It's just Twitter. But those are ultimately my thoughts with it. I think Ward's going to be a good addition, hell of a lot better than some of the other options they had. Now, do you think that this impacts positively or negatively the chances of bringing back Verrett? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be positive because now the 49ers don't have to be desperate for Verrett. And he's going to be at best, the fourth guy off the bench, if not the fifth guy with Lenore there. So it gives them the chance to really be conservative with Verrett, really work on getting him healthy. And even if he doesn't start the season and they just kind of ease him in at the tail end of the season to kind of see if he's ready to play for the playoffs, I think it's that type of situation where you have three guys that are going to be able to hold down the fort, and then Verrett could come in kind of like he did at 2020, where he came in at the end of the season and just lit things up. If we could do that, but actually be in playoff contention, to have a guy like that just come off the bench and be able to be that playoff designated hitter type situation as far as a cornerback that you throw on the best receiver on the other side, I think that would play wonders for it. So I already think the 49ers have done a lot to gain goodwill with Verrett. So I think that Verrett and the 49ers will have mutual interest, and Verrett will, give the 49ers a little bit of leeway just because of how well they've treated him, even though he hasn't played much for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, by the way. I think that Verrett, there's a better chance that he's coming back. And I feel better about it than what I would have felt back maybe a week ago or before this signing, because Verrett being my first guy off the bench, I'm like, hold on a second. I don't know if I want to rely on
Right.
that. But if he doesn't have to be the first guy off the bench, I like that. Also, maybe Verrett, who is a smaller guy, can play nickel corner. And I think you brought this up a couple weeks ago that if we had gotten another number one corner, that maybe Mosley is the guy that can be the nickel corner. Now, Mosley can start outside, but when they go to those nickel packages, they can bring in Ambry, who can play outside, and then Mosley can kick inside. He is very versatile. So maybe there is some flexibility with this move that a lot of people aren't looking at. And that's even more reason to be excited. But the cornerback room certainly got better with this move overall for sure. Let me get to this super chat. Gardo coming in again says, should we be aggressive in the draft? Trade up multiple times for better players. Yeah, I mean, they've got, and I don't think I had it in my notes here to talk about, but let me pull up the picture because I
10
definitely
picks,
did take one.
9
Well,
once they give one to Miami. So
yeah, it's a lot of picks, but they picked up
two
hold on a
thirds,
second.
2 sixths, and a seventh, I think.
Yeah,
So
okay. So comp picks 102, 105, which are third rounders, 220 and 221, which are sixth rounders, and 262, which is a seventh rounder. So a lot of capital that they gained. Now, if they can still trade Jimmy for something, maybe they trade Dre Greenlaw for something, there are even more picks that could possibly come in. So for me, I think that they definitely can be aggressive, especially once it hits mid second round. They really can start owning the board and figuring out exactly what it is they want and make those moves to go out and get certain players. Now, I know that I see this here, trade up, draft Christian Watson. usually, Jacob, and I hate to burst the bubble, but usually they trade up and draft guys that we never expected or haven't even talked about. But
Right.
maybe it is for Christian Watson. You never know. And Christian Watson, I'm definitely warming up to the idea of getting somebody like that. Still, I would probably go a different direction, but I'm not going to hate it by any means if that's the route that they decide to take. I appreciate both of you for tapping in, dropping some super chats. So